Varying heights are going to be very important because that's how the building supports itself. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but first I want to know, can anyone name that tall black building for me? Sears Tower is correct. I'll accept no other answers. We don't like learning the names for stuff. We're not going to call it anything different. We're still going to call it out the Sears Tower. And the Sears Tower, actually, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. People up front, especially if you're sitting anywhere near me, and like if you could see me physically, please try and keep it down a little bit. It's getting very distracting, the level of chatter up here. And if you got like a kid or something, maybe screaming, there's also downstairs area. Maybe get them out of the sun. Sometimes kids do not like being in the sun.
Yeah.
But yeah. So downstairs, if you really want to talk or anything like that, it's very distracting. Now, Sears Tower. I mentioned that it comes up to all these varying heights. We're going to explain how that works. It's how the building support system works. It's the first example of what is called the Second School of Chicago Architecture, and it was inspired by cigarettes. Sears Tower is inspired by cigarettes, and that sounds very weird, but I'm going to walk it back a step, explain that for you. Bruce Graham was the architect, Fosli Khan was the engineer, and Bruce Graham had a meeting with him at a bar. They're deciding how they're going to build the tallest building in the world. And bars in those days, I guess, had bowls of cigarettes around. He grabs one, snaps it in half, shows how easy that is. Then he grabs several, shows how much stronger those are, can't even break them anymore. And they come up with the idea of not building one Sears Tower, they build 9 separate Sears Towers working in unison to hold up the entire weight of the structure. So all those different heights it's coming up to is because those are structurally separate towers supporting the weight of the towers around it. That is the Second School of Chicago Architecture. That is how you build super tall. Up to and including the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, they're going to be built in that style. That's how you build mega skyscrapers now. So while this is not the tallest building in the world anymore, it is the blueprint for all the ones that are taller than it, which is still pretty cool. And that sounds a little defensive, but it is what it is. And the other thing I want to address while we're down here is these bridges. We're going to go under a lot of bridges throughout this tour. That's because we have the most movable bridges of any city in the world. We have tons of movable bridges. They do still all operate, and these are for the most part going to be what are called trunnion bascule bridges. Trunnion's basically an axle that rotates, lifts the bridge. It's a very quick, efficient, simple system, still operational. These do still work, and you're going to see them lift up on Wednesdays and Saturdays throughout the summer, throughout our boating season, when larger vessels have to get through, either out to the harbor or back out when they have to get out for the season. And the bridges themselves will also lift up, like say on a Thursday or a Friday, but you got to call ahead, you got to schedule ahead, and you got to pay $1,000 per bridge. So yeah, it could be very expensive. You're looking at a bill of up to 30 grand to get through Chicago. So you don't see that very often, but you do occasionally still see it. Now, to our left here, you're going to see these buildings that have trains underneath them. And these trains were actually here first. The buildings came later. And that's interesting for a couple of reasons. First off, the buildings don't own the land that they're on, because the trains are there first. The trains own the land, and they're renting out the sky above it in what they call air rights. So they're renting out air above land that they own, and this air is about $1 million a year. You're going to be paying over here. And all you get that contract is there. Other reason why those trains down there are interesting is because they have, well, they kind of change the way the structures above them work. You can't build a regular full foundation out when you have to operate a train yard through your basement, right? It just makes sense. So you're going to see a lot of competing strategies on how to deal with all that weight. You're going to see several, actually, because they're going to be along the riverfront with us all the way out to Wolf Point, which we'll adjust when we get there. So our trains underneath all of these, even if you can't quite see them. They're hidden here, but they're still underneath this building, to North Riverside, this tall brownish one. This was actually the first building built using air rights, renting out air above land that you don't own. And you can see their strategy for it was pretty simple. All they did was offset most of the weight away from those train yards. And this is not a very common term anymore, but this was referred to as Chicago's Sphinx. And I think it's very dubious how it got that title. You can see they just offset the weight, and there are these two jutting out sides, make it Sphinx-like. We don't really use that term anymore because honestly it didn't even make sense at the time. That's where that gets that. Now, ahead of it, you got this blue building with this metallic trapezoid system up here, which first off, when was the last time you heard the word trapezoid? Yeah, 6th grade geometry and it never came up again. You thought it'd be very important? Kind of is, if you're in engineering. It is a very strong shape, and it is left exposed up there because that is what is called a reverse truss. It is suspending this corner of the building from the air, not the ground. All the weight is going up, not down. It's not putting weight on the ground, it's putting weight towards the sky. The way they did this is they built the frame of that, they built that reverse truss system, that trapezoid, then they built the top floor first, then the floor beneath it, then the floor beneath that, etc., etc. So this was built upside down and structurally is upside down. So the Boeing building is upside down. Also, the Boeing building here, not built by Boeing. You're safe, no reason to be nervous. This is built by Morton Salt Company originally. And notably the Boeing building here, that clock tower on it, that's the third tallest clock tower in the United States. All right, we're good at pretending to care. Yeah, I don't think we actually care about that, but just in case you do, we do that. And this next building, I do think is very, very cool. You see this V-shaped skyscraper. At this point, I mostly just want you to take pictures of it. If you're taking photos, I think it's just really awesome. Just engineering-wise, what they managed to pull off here. So you'll notice the foundation is like less than a third the size of the actual structure itself. And we'll talk about how they did this and why they did this on our way back. Because there's a lot of other details that we'll get you through other buildings. We'll eventually connect it back to this towards the end of the tour. Right now, I just want you to see it. Because this building is, what do we think about that? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Isn't that cool? Yeah, I'm a big fan of this. Also notably, this is where my friend Bruce works. Give it up for Bruce. Yeah. That's what's notable about the building for sure. And yeah, again, we'll talk about it on our way back. Other thing I want to talk about while we're down here is on our right-hand side, you have this red brick building. This would originally have been the location of the Sauganosh Tavern before the 1871 Chicago fire. This was the Sauganosh Tavern. It's notably where Chicago signed its charter to become a city. So Chicago was born in a bar, and the bar was originally located right here at this corner. And the Sauganosh Tavern was named after a local Native American named Sauganosh. Sauganosh later changed his name to Bill Caldwell. So like Caldwell Avenue and things like that, it's going to be named after him. That's just such a huge change. Sauganosh to Bill Caldwell. But yeah, he's a very important character.